Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and today I'm reaching you from the United Nations headquarters in New York. But first, here's my take for today entitled, In Diplomacy, Presence is Power and Absence is Notice. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to be absent at the United Nations General Assembly for the second time. Currently, Nigeria doesn't have ambassadors in its well over 100 diplomatic missions across the world, including here at the United Nations. No permanent representative since 2024. And now, world leaders are gathering as from Tuesday here in New York, the largest gatherings of heads of state and government on the earth. And it happens once every year. But guess what? President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to be absent just like he was last year. For context, President Buhari attended every General Assembly meeting of the United Nations for the 8 years he was in office. So this is a serious matter because in diplomacy, presence is power and absence is notice. It was a former UN Secretary of State who said, if you are not at the table in the international system, you are going to be on the menu. Here in New York, leaders from all over the world are converging to define their country's place in the world. The summit officially started September 9, but the general debate for heads of state and government starts from September 23 to the 29th. Last year, Vice President Kashim Shettima stepped up to the plate at the last minute to represent Nigeria, and observers said it performed very well. The president again has tasked his deputy to speak on Nigeria's behalf. There's no official reason given for the president's absence for the second time, but I guess none is required. What some retired and serving diplomats worry about is that Nigeria is missing out on the world's largest multilateral gathering where leaders often deepen relationships and advance their country's interest. Not that the vice president doesn't represent the country, but presidents open doors that vice president cannot. Why does it matter? The General Assembly is more than a week of speeches. It's the world's largest marketplace practically and diplomatically. Behind the cameras, presidents and heads and prime ministers hold private meetings where serious deals are initiated, security partnerships are shaped, and multilateral funding unlocked. For Nigeria, a handshake in New York can accelerate deals that might otherwise take years or decades, if ever. With over 200 million citizens and Nigeria's role as the economic engine of West Africa, we typically as a country command attention here at the UN when the president himself shows up, doors open faster, and requests to see the president also abounds, including from people that really matter. Nigerians have noticed a president who frequently travels internationally, that's President Tinubu, but now he has kept hunger for 2 years in a row. Is it that the president is prioritizing domestic challenges over attending the world's largest diplomatic forum? Whatever the reason is, in diplomacy, presence is power and absence is noticed, especially not at this crucial time when Africa is pushing for the reform of the United Nations Security Council, with Nigeria likely to be a beneficiary. There are also issues around debt relief and climate financing, with African nations receiving only a fraction of the funds required, for instance, for climate adaptation issues. And Nigeria, as Africa's largest economy, has a critical voice to these issues. Nigeria's absence, with the president's absence, makes the matters a little bit dicey. So while other world leaders debate conflicts, climate change, and global economic reforms, international security on the global stage, one of Africa's most influential presidents is not in the room for 2 years running. And for Nigerians watching closely, that absence speaks so loudly. The Vice President Shettima will try his best. He will do it very well. But 8 years in the presidency has shown me that the difference between a president and the vice president is not just limited to the spare tire analogy. It is not a difference between sleeping and staying awake. The difference between the president and the vice president is the difference between life and death. That is why presidents ought to take such a gathering like that of the United Nations General Assembly very, very seriously. And there you have it. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today we are in New York, where the United Nations is marking its 80th anniversary with a summit, and then the General Assembly will be following next week. I have an important guest today. We're going to be talking about the future of the country. We're going to be talking about quite a lot of issues around the state of the nation. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, right here in New York, Mr. Reno Omokri, former presidential spokesperson, best-selling author. Reno, good to see you in New York.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
All right, excellent. Let's get into this conversation that I want us to have quite a lot of issues to talk about. And I want to start with two important things that to me, good thing both of us have started in the presidency. I left with two impressions of what has to happen at the very minimum, regardless of political affiliations, who is president, who is not. Corruption and poverty. But let's take it from poverty. I think whatever it is, we got to deal with the problem of poverty in our country. What's your take, Reno?
There's no president who will be able to deal with poverty except he also deals with the population explosion that's happening in Nigeria. Right now, we're seeing that Asiwaju is doing a lot of things. We're seeing that our trade surplus is now $14.1 billion for last year. And then this year, we're set to beat that because if you look at the Q1 and Q2, we are already 44.3% higher than last year. We're seeing that the economy is growing at the rate of 3.84. We're seeing that our debt is down from 113 billion to about 97 billion. We're also seeing that the Naira has stabilized. It's now below 1,500 for the first time in 5 months. Also, crude sales are up. This is the first time in 10 years that we have actually beaten our OPEC quota. So our OPEC quota is about 1.5 million barrels per day. We are doing 1.71 million barrels per day. And we're also seeing that the stock exchange is now growing. We're now at above 130,000 ASI, all share index. And for the first time, we now have a $10 trillion company in Nigeria, MTN. They crossed that, I think that was 3 days ago. But despite...
10 trillion naira.
10 trillion naira, yeah. Despite all of this, where we have a situation whereby our population is growing almost faster than our economy, it's going to take a miracle for us to deal with poverty. A lot of people, if you look at the figures from the UNFPA, you're going to think that maybe Niger has the fastest growing population in the whole world. But that is a mirage. If you take the northwest of Nigeria and then carve it out of Nigeria, just take it as a separate country, the northwest, they have a higher growth rate, population growth rate than Niger. Now, the thing is, the Northwest has a higher population on its own than Niger. Niger is about 20 million or thereabout. Okay. The Northwest has a higher population because that's the most populated part of Nigeria.
Yes.
So now, if you have the Northwest growing at almost 4.3% every year, and then our economy is growing at 3.84%, we're never going to deal with poverty. And then you're going to have people who, because our people are very ignorant. Our people, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. We are.
Well, we need to catch up.
We need to catch up.
Yeah.
Adult literacy is not where it should be. So you're going to have a lot of people who are emotionally driven, and they're going to say, the government is bad. The issue is not the government. Look at all of the things I've just mentioned.
Right.
If this were to happen in a country like Zimbabwe, their economy would just explode with progress. But when you're having in the Northwest, our explosion. See, the Southwest is not really, you're going to see prosperity there because the Southwest has one of the lowest population growth rates in Nigeria. So because of that, you're going to be seeing that the effects of all of these things that the government is doing. But in the Northwest, you're not going to see that. And except people, first and foremost, the government cannot do it. Any government, both by a northern president or a southern president, because if you try that, they'll say, you're against Islam.
That means you're trying to talk about population control.
Population control. So the only people that can do it, you need someone like the Sultan, Sheikh Gumi, the Emir of Kanu.
The people that they will listen to.
Yes, that they will listen to. Because it does not matter who, if you bring an angel to Nigeria, if our economy is growing at 3.84, and you have that consistent at 10 years, for 10 years, and that's not going to happen. No economy will grow at that speed for 10 years because you're going to have a transition, you're going to have a new government, and when you have a new government, traditionally the economy just slows a bit until they get the hang of things. But then the population keeps on growing steadily in the Northwest, 4.3, 4.3, 4.3. Women in the Northwest are having twice as much babies in a lifespan as women in the South. So, in Nigeria, we tend to look at things from an ethnic perspective, a religious perspective. We don't want to look at things from an economic perspective. And you're going to have mischievous people like Nasir El-Rufai who will come out and then manipulate the minds of the people. Southerners don't like you, Tinubu don't like you. The main issue with the Because, I was recently in the Northwest.
Okay.
I was just there, I think that was 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
The main issue is the population explosion in the Northwest.
Okay. So your approach to the problem of poverty is to say that, look, it's a question of population that is not controlled. And that's one way to look at it. But I think that we can also look at it from the point of view of providing some kind of social safety nets. You grew up in America, we have the social security. There are things that government will normally do to take care of the people before the economic policies can germinate, because if you don't do those things, people are going to, people can wait, and if you look at the numbers of the poverty, you will see that there is a justification for some kind of stopgap safety nets to help the people, and so besides the question of trying to see how we can manage our population, don't you think that having a serious social safety net, and I'm not saying just only the federal government, but of course the federal government has to take the lead, but the states also, to help the people in the stopgap before we are able to sort out, many of the other issues, population, economic policy. What do you think?
Every country that has a welfare system, because what you're talking about is a welfare system, and in this
necessarily,
country, social security is welfareism. Social security.
But America is not welfareist.
Yeah, no. Social security is actually welfareist in America.
Yeah.
America is a capitalist country.
Exactly.
But social security is social security was actually started by the FDR administration, implemented by his successor, because he died before he could fully implement it. And then Harry Truman came in, and Harry Truman himself said it was a form of welfare. So here's the thing. It can only happen where you have people paying taxes. In this country, the United States, they've got a minimum of tax to GDP ratio of about 34%.
Right.
So in the United Kingdom, where it's in fact, it is on steroids, welfareism is on steroids, they've got, like a large, I think it's even larger than the United States, tax to GDP ratio. In Germany, the same thing. If you earn in Germany about 54,000 euro, you're going to be paying about 26,000 in taxes. Nigeria has one of the, I think Nigeria has the lowest tax to GDP ratio in the whole world. It's about 6%. Some people exaggerate it and say it's about 9%, but if you look at the figures, it's about 6%. So if you have something like maybe between 3 to 6% of the population paying taxes, and then you want to have a welfare system, and then where you have the population explosion, people are not paying taxes, it's not going to work.
But okay, I see your point. But is it not also a question of the resources that the government has, the country has? Yes, you are right. And I believe also that we need to step up the taxes reform, which is quite what some of the achievements of the Tinubu administration. We expect that by January this year, some of those reforms will be in place. But taxation is one of the ways that the revenue comes in. We have other significant forms of revenue.
That's a big mistake. We don't have significant forms of revenue.
Wait, which is the reason why our tax enforcement dwindled. We make quite a lot of money. There was a time in this country where the head of state did say that money is, getting money is not our problem, is what to spend with it. I'm saying that we have significant income, and I'm not trying to understate the importance of taxation by no means. But I'm saying that in addition to that, Nigeria also has significant revenues coming in that ought to be able to make the government capable of doing serious social safety nets.
We don't have significant resources. That's actually not a fact.
What do you say?
I'm coming here. I spoke with General Gowon. What you just said, which is, a lot of people, it's actually a myth. It was actually, taken out of context. What he said is that, not that Nigeria just had too much money, and then people take that, okay, what he said that money is not Nigeria's problem, but how to spend it. What he actually said was how to invest it, because he did not know at that time. He was very young, and then the civil servants, the super palmsecs, they were also very young people. So there was a lot of, lacuna on how to invest the money. Nigeria has never been money. No. Let me land. Nigeria has never been an oil-rich country. That has been a myth. If you take a country like Qatar, I was in Qatar last week, 10 days ago. I was in Qatar. Qatar makes $64 billion from oil and gas every year.
Right.
Qatar's population is not up to the population of Ikeja local government. And you can fact check me. Their population is not up to... If you go to Qatar, one of the things that will shock you is that from the airport to the city, the people who do the work are not even Qatari citizens. They have to import people because their population is so low.
Right.
Nigeria actually makes half of what Qatar is making, and our population is about 235 million. Let me land. So you're now having about 36 billion, which is what we make from oil and gas annually. If you divide that by a population of 235 million, you see that what we have is oil poverty. That's about $150 per citizen.
No, I see your point again, and I see that we are hedging at it from different points, because I don't necessarily disagree that some of these Gulf countries make more money in terms of oil. We have a lot of problems in our oil and gas industry. We don't have enough investment. But the point is still there that we make enough. I mean, look at the level of corruption in our country. We make enough for people to steal money. To invest money in social investment. My argument is that we do have the resources. Are you saying that we don't have the resources?
We do not have the resources. And first and foremost, corruption in Nigeria is down. And how do we know that? We have only one body in Nigeria that has been given, or that in the world, that has the mandate to gauge corruption. That's Transparency International. And according to them, corruption in Nigeria is down.
Marginally.
Well, it doesn't matter. Any progress must be celebrated. Now, to prove to you that what I'm saying is factual, if you look at a country like Venezuela, which has more than 8 times in terms of proven reserves than a lot of countries. Even Nigeria, they've got much more than Nigeria. Venezuela right now is actually poorer than Nigeria. I was in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is infested with Venezuelan refugees. Listen, a country like Nigeria is oil poor. We don't have enough oil resources. I'm okay. Let me even put it in starker terms. Saudi Arabia, they've got a population of about 35 million people. They make about $450 billion from oil and gas. So if you take their population and divide it by their income, you're looking at about $10,000 per citizen. So how do you compare us with $150 per citizen with a country like Saudi Arabia with $10,000 per citizen?
No, I'm not saying that, and that's the point I made. It's not that we are comparing. I'm saying that on our own, we have enough money to take care of these things.
Don't.
That's my argument. Wait, just a minute. So in 1980, and in the early 80s, if you look at the exchange rate of the naira to the dollar, as a matter of fact, I think in 1980 the naira was stronger than the dollar.
The naira wasn't stronger than the dollar.
It was. I'll give you an experience. I have a personal experience. My father sent my brother to the US in 1980-81. Gave him 25,000 naira.
That would give you about $40,000 at that time.
Well, okay.
About $40,000.
So my point is that naira. So he gave him 25,000 naira, and he got a little bit more in numbers, in dollars. That happened in this country. So I think between now and then, what has happened to us is mismanagement.
But that's not true. You see, look, you got to allow me land. I've got a master's in law from England, and my specialty was international banking and finance. The naira was never stronger than the dollar or the pound. At that time, under Shagari, the naira was pegged. So because the naira was pegged, it was being subsidized. Please let me
make a difference. The pound has always been pegged.
No, the pound is not pegged. The pound is not pegged. No, listen, that's not a fact. The pound is a floated currency. The US dollar is a floated currency. So that's why every day you have the spot rate, because it is the law of demand and supply that determines the value of the pound or the dollar. They have a spot rate. It's a floated currency.
We can go into the historical facts.
No, allow me land.
Right.
The naira was pegged from that time up until 2023. So it got to the point under...
2023?
Yeah, so 2023, yeah.
No, you can't say that. Look, I mean, the military people came in, they started the devaluation of the naira in 1884.
Can I explain that? Can I explain that? When you peg a currency, which is what Egypt is doing, pegging a currency means that the state determines the price of the currency. So when you peg a currency, you as a state can come back and say, well, it's no longer this, it's now this. That's pegging. So the military might have devalued the naira, but they didn't float the naira. So what they just did was that, okay, as a state, we are going to use our fiat powers to say that the naira is no longer this value, is this value.
No, they also base it, I mean, don't let the ministers of finance of Babangida hear you say that, Reno, they also based it on market forces.
No, that's not factual.
No, they had all kinds of switch auction system,
Let me explain that.
firm and all of those stuff, which were based on the market.
No, it wasn't based on market. Let me explain to you.
No.
I have expertise in this. I've worked.
Look, Reno, let's just talk about facts. Let's talk about facts.
But these are facts I'm telling you.
During the military rule, we had several situations where the naira was tied to the market. There was firm.
Yes, second-tier foreign exchange market.
Exactly.
Let me explain it to you so you understand. The second-tier foreign exchange market was just a system whereby you had a system of parameters whereby the government said, okay, from here to here, this is where you can trade. But it was still pegged. The naira has been pegged, and this is a fact. Even the Central Bank of Nigeria will not dispute this. The naira was pegged, it stopped being pegged in 2023. During the Buhari administration, we were spending $1.5 billion every month to subsidize the naira at the level that it was. This is the first time now that we are having the naira floated.
Okay. Anyway, so my point, so that we can move to something is that we do have enough resources to do social safety net. Your argument is that we don't.
We do not. Okay. Nigeria is not.
All right.
Nigeria is not at that level.
So you think that government? You think that government should just watch? Should ignore the level of. So what ought to happen to deal with poverty in Nigeria?
What can happen is that at a state level, you're going to have states that can afford it give social security. For example, in Lagos is giving social security because Lagos can afford it, because Lagos's economy is not an oil and gas economy. Lagos's economy is tied to taxation. So Lagos has the highest tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria. Other states do not. For example, if something happened now and the price of oil crashed completely, about maybe 70% of the states cannot pay salaries. So the federal government is trying to move from that. That's why you see that under Asiwaju, now we're seeing that non-oil revenue is increasing. But it hasn't yet got to that point whereby it can sustain us. So we need a period of about 5 years of Nigeria growing at the level that we're growing at, which is we are delivering about 3.84 GDP growth rate. And then we need to have a buffer, which we had under the Goodluck administration, which was called the excess crude account. So you have the excess crude account, which we don't have anymore because the money was frittered away. But when you have that, then you can take from there to do social security at a federal level. Right now, what we're seeing is that the federal government has removed the subsidies on the naira. That's why the naira is being frittered, and the subsidy on the petrol. And because of that, they are now using that money to give NELFund student loans. Almost 1 million students are getting the NELFund student loan. That is a form of social security because those students right now, they are going to graduate, they will work, and then they are going to be able to be taxed, which is going to increase our tax to GDP ratio.
So I mean, it's good that you're coming around to say that we can do some kind of social safety net. If you are saying that NELFund is social safety net, excellent, because I also support NELFund, by the way. And that's my argument, that look, the federal government, you're right, state government ought to also do it, and I said that from the beginning, but the federal government, even they have a ministry. I think it was the Asiwaju administration that actually named humanitarian affairs and added poverty alleviation. I'm not sure that was during the Buhari. I think Buhari called it humanitarian disaster management. I'm not sure they call it poverty alleviation. So even the president thinks that we have to do a bit of poverty alleviation. But let's move along. Since we found at least NELFund is a common ground. What about corruption, Reno? What's your take about corruption? Now, let me give my whole intro. I don't think that you can have a society with zero corruption. It doesn't happen anywhere. But I think the extent of corruption in Nigeria has become very corrosive. That everybody, top and down, in government, outside government, individuals, I think we need to have some kind of a national consensus and any consensus to say that look, we need to fight corruption. We need to reduce the level of corruption in our country. You are right. There's been a marginal improvement according to the transparency report, but we need to be much more radical about fighting corruption.
Nigeria is not as corrupt as even the Transparency International say it is. The reason why people think that Nigeria is corrupt is because of self-reporting. Nigerians, you see, when I read Margaret Mitchell's book, Gone with the Wind, where she said that black people like to spread bad news, I felt she was racist until I went back to Nigeria to work as a presidential spokesman and I saw the behavior of our people. Culturally, the black
It's
man...
tied to our socio-economic status.
Yeah, culturally, the black man feels happier when he's spreading bad news than good news. And we've got to change that.
Right. Don't agree with that, Reno. Don't let yourself agree with that.
But it's what I see. I tend to be a factual person. Now, in Nigeria, we're seeing that we improved a lot in corruption rating. And Nigeria is, I'll give an example. We're in New York, in this city that we are. We had a guy called Benny Madoff who stole $50 billion about, this was about 10 years ago.
Right.
It cannot happen in Nigeria. In this country that we're in, we had a president, Joe Biden, and his son that were proven to have been receiving kickbacks from Chinese and Ukrainian state factors. So in this country, we also had other issues, with officials that I don't want to name because some of them are in power. Right. Nigeria is not that bad. Under Margaret Thatcher, her son, Sir Mark Thatcher, was going around with his mother and collecting contracts from the Middle East. In France, Mitterrand's children were actually arrested for corruption. Look, it is a global problem. In Nigeria, we are dealing with it. And the only way that we can deal with it systematically is what Asiwaju is doing and what even my boss tried to do. And, he couldn't finish doing it. President Jonathan, we need to privatize as much of our country as possible so that the avenues for corruption are very limited. And then once we have a small government and we focus on regulation, then the avenues for corruption will be very little. Look, the NNPCL is one of the places where, according to Transparency International, there's some corruption. Serious corruption. If we can completely privatize the NNPCL so that it's a private company, completely
without government,
without any government control, where the president does not even appoint.
What about the NLLG model, where government has 49% and then the private interest has 51%, and that way they get to manage it?
Well, even the NLLG model, which is significantly better than the NNPCL model, there are still accusations of corruption there. So if you look at systems all over the world, where you have a private sector-led system, corruption drops significantly. So I'm going to give you a very good example now. In the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher said, she's going to sell everything sellable. So British Gas went, British Telecom went. A lot of people don't even realize that British Airways is owned by a Spanish conglomerate. The airports were all sold. And when that happened, corruption in the United Kingdom dropped significantly. But if you have a system whereby the government controls the railways, the government controls the oil and gas sector, the government controls the maritime sector, you're going to have avenues for corruption because you can't be paying somebody minimum wage of 70,000 naira and then the person 77,000 naira and then the person is sitting on contracts worth about $1 million, $30 million. There's going to be corruption. But when you privatize this, the private sector is not going to pay people 77,000 naira to do that job. The private sector is going to pay them, competitive salaries, and that is going to drive corruption. But until you do that, you got to realize that it's systems. It's systems. You have people who are ambassadors. They come in their country. They drive. They obey every traffic light. They come to Lagos. They start beating traffic lights. Why? It's because of the system. So if you address the system, you're going to address
corruption. I agree that there's quite a bit of our attitude, You see Nigerians, once they get out of Nigeria, they follow the law. They behave properly. But when we come home, it's a whole different ballgame. I agree with that. Driving on the road, even as early as yesterday in Abuja, you see people driving against traffic. And you wonder, are they crazy? I remember, during Fashion last time, we actually got people arrested and we take them to a psychologist to actually check their... So I agree about those issues. But my argument is that it is still up to government to deal with it, and to come back to the issue of corruption. The EFCC chairman himself, Mr. Ola Olukayede, has been screaming that the level of corruption in NNPC is huge, that he can't even talk about it. And both himself and the chairman of ICPC, which is the question I want to ask you, said that, look, we should get the National Assembly to adopt the Unexplained Wealth Bill, which means that if you are caught, especially if you are working with government, but generally if you are caught with resources and property that does not align with your known income, then the onus, you have a master's degree in law, the onus then shifts according to that law, that you ought to be the one to tell us where you got the money. I'm told that right now our system is that, look, if I accuse you that you have stolen money, I have to be the one to prove it. But if we have the Unexplained Wealth Bill, and we think that somebody has stolen money from government coffers or whichever way, it will be up to him to prove that that is money legitimately sourced. What do you think about that?
Every country that has tried that, their economy has shrunk. Because you got to understand, money does not like where there is fear. If anywhere there is fear, money runs away. I'm going to give you a typical example. One country that tried that was Tanzania under Umwalimu Julius Nyerere. Now, you got to understand, Tanzania has a larger population than Kenya. Yet, Kenya's economy is significantly larger than Tanzania. It's because when they brought that out, a lot of money left Tanzania. There was fear. So you need to have an atmosphere of, of freedom. That's why they call it a free market. When you have a free market, then your economy is going to expand.
But there's nothing against free market about an unexplained wealth bill.
Yeah, so when you have an unexplained wealth bill, you see, here's what you got to understand is that it's not every wealth that people can explain publicly, and they don't want to explain to people. So if you have that kind of system, that is, I'm telling you, so because one thing you got to understand, the best predictor of the future is the past. So when you want to do something like that, you look at countries that have done it in the past. Have they been successful? And if they've not been successful, then it's unlikely they're going to be successful.
No, I think that, you are underestimating the nature of corruption in Nigeria. And I see your point that you made about the fact that, corruption is everywhere, and I agree with that. But I think that corruption is a major problem, and we have to deal with it in a more granular and a grand way.
I will disagree with you there, because if you look at Nigeria right now, we had a minister who was accused of corruption. It wasn't proven. What happened? The president sacked her. Under the Buhari administration was, in terms of, according to Transparency International, the worst government since 1999 in terms of corruption, because of the way that corruption increased. Now, that's not my opinion, that's Transparency International. But then if you look at Buhari's administration, there was a failure to supervise his ministers as well as those under him. For example, if you look at the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, the things that the man was allowed to get away with. So if you want to address corruption, those are the things that you do, not this unexplained wealth phenomena. I'm going to give you a very good example. Under Buhari, you had a minister who wrote a memo. The memo leaked. The memo accused the NNPC of awarding, I think it was about $25 billion worth of contracts without a tender. What happened? The minister was not returned, and then the GMD of the NNPC remained. So that kind of thing, it actually doesn't, speak well to Transparency International about our corruption perception.
Which minister is that?
That was Ibe Kachiku. He was not returned. But the NNPC GMD returned, and then in subsequent interviews, Kachika is, look, I stand by what I said, and it's not just that. There were several things. You had people who were close to the president who were involved. For example, till today, Nigeria still don't know who owns the Ikoyi apartments with millions. Till today,
I think, and I don't know whether we should say that it is because of the president, trying to control EFCC. I wouldn't want to say that. But a lot of these people, they take their cues even from simple body language. They say, the president doesn't want that to happen. I'll give you an example, and I will mention names. I know a president, since 1999, one of the presidents whose minister of finance was caught with money. And the president said to the FCC, okay, you know what, just let the money be returned, and the minister was not fired. Of course, that's not Asiwaju. So if we are comparing, we have a lot of things to say there, but I look at the problems today as a cumulative problem. And that's why I say to people that even criticize Asiwaju or some of those things, I say, look, this man has done 2 years. I am still giving him 2 years. A lot of my guests will laugh at me and say, this man is not. But I'm still giving him the benefit of the doubt, because if he has 2 years, he's probably going to get 8. Buhari got 8 before we started to make judgment. So I think there's still time. But the president ought to do in NNPC what he did in CBN.
Yeah, but
get a special investigator there
taking
to go
time.
and show us on some of the stuff that is going on there, and be very strong like you did with CBN.
No, but
exposing what Emefiele did, and letting him go to the trial. Let's do the same thing in NNPC.
No, but I think the president is already doing that. But you have to realize that these things are processes. If you recall, one of the first things that the president did when he came on board was to remove the collection of all receipts from NNPCL and give it to the Central Bank of Nigeria.
That's true.
So that is the beginning of the process.
Which was the major.
That is the beginning of the process. And then, because if you read the book about reforms, if you try to reform too fast, you can create such instability in the country that can even consume you. So you've got to take your time. You can't be reforming CBN at such breathtaking speed and then you start to do the same thing at NNPCL. These are people, some of these civil servants have $100 million in their account. They will start putting all these bloggers and all these influencers on their payroll to start writing lies about the administration. And if you give a Nigerian, the choice between believing the truth and the lie, and Nigerian will believe the lie without evidence and asking for evidence of the truth.
Is it not because we have allowed impunity for so long, Reno?
Yeah, it's quite possible.
For so long.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible, but you've got to remember that Nigeria is not meant to be the way it is. Because even our founding fathers and the British both knew that Nigeria cannot work as like a federal, like a central unit. That's why when we were under colonialism, we had regionalism. And then when we were having independent self-rule, the British agreed with our forefathers that let's continue regionalism. Because you cannot expect somebody like maybe the people in the Southwest, for example, to grow at the same speed as the people in the Northwest or in the Northeast.
You have a very good point about the fact that people in different parts of the country want different things. Which brings us to the question of restructuring Nigeria. One of the things, again, so when I move away from corruption and poverty, that I think President Tinubu ought to do, and that President Tinubu must not leave Aso Villa if he doesn't restructure this country. And I think you are right that we need a true federal system that allows each of the regions to do their stuff, and we make sure that the federal government manages currency, national economy, defense, foreign affairs. Do you know that today, if I want to start a business and I'm living in Ibadan, where I was born, I have to come to Abuja to get some kind of registration? You lived in the US, I lived in the US for 17 years. I can start a business. I actually started a business in Long Island. I didn't even have to go. I never had to go to the capital of New York in upstate. What's the name of this town? Albany. But today in Nigeria, if you live in Guzo, you want to start a business, you must come to Abuja. So, do you think, can you urge the president, can you add your voice, Reno, to say that, Mr. President, ensure that Nigeria is restructured, do whatever it takes that Nigeria is restructured?
I think it's a very big mistake for people not to realize that Nigeria has already been restructured. And we're going to begin to see... let me land. We're going to begin to see the effects of that restructuring on January 1st, 2026. Now, we have local government autonomy, which is already in effect, but according to sources that I heard, it's going to take greater effect on January 1st.
That Supreme Court judgment has not been implemented.
Yeah, but allow me land. So, but it's going to take, because they've been conversing with the governors, because they have to work with the governors.
The governors don't want it.
Yeah, so the governors might not want it, but it's going to take effect, stronger effect, 1st of January 2026. And then you got the new tax reform bill. So, for example, you're going to see a bunch of people complain that Lagos has gotten about $400 million for the new Lagos airport. Lagos has gotten something like maybe 3-point-something trillion for the third mainland bridge, this and that. You're never ever going to see people complain that Lagos is generating 54% of the VAT that is coming to Nigeria. You're never going to see people saying that, oh, your state is generating 3 times, or your state alone is generating 3 times the VAT that the entire 5 southeastern states generate, or your state alone. You're never going to see people saying that, oh, the southwest on its own is actually carrying Nigeria financially in terms of VAT revenue, because they are contributing something like 62% of all of the VAT collected in Nigeria. It is only when it comes to sharing. So now, what are we seeing now? We're seeing that we're now having a tax reform, which has been signed into law. It's going to come into effect 1st of January 2026, where states and local government are going to have more power in collecting and keeping taxes that they collect. So it's going to spur people to be competitive, so that you don't have to now start depending on Lagos. Because if you think about it now, if you look at Lagos, for example, the Lagos airport, it has right now capacity for about 6 million passengers annually. And then 30 December, it brings in about $73 million every year to Lagos. But the government of Lagos has said the reason why it's bringing, some people think it's a lot of money, but they're saying that it can be more. Their challenge is that Lagos Airport cannot accommodate the 20 million people who would want to come. If you have a situation where Lagos Airport, that's Murtala Mohammed Airport, is upgraded, and so it has capacity to grow from 6 million passengers annually to about 20 million passengers annually, Lagos is going to make more from 30 December. Now, if Lagos makes more from 30 December, other states are going to get more, because a lot of their VAT revenue does not even come from their state. It comes from Lagos. But then people from some of these states are the ones complaining about Lagos. So, Asiwaju has fixed that with the new tax reform bill, which has been signed. Now, a lot of people don't realize that regionalism has actually come into Nigeria, because each region now has its own development commission. So you have all of the regions having their development commission. The plan, if you look at the law setting up the development commission, these commissions are going to be having more resources than the state governments in their regions. And then they are going to become more powerful in that they will start building infrastructure. And then they are not going to be held back by houses of assemblies, they're going to be dealing with the National Assembly. So they are going to be strong. So this is what we call restructuring by the back door, and only a politician as astute, as brilliant as Asiwaju could have done it.
But do you want him to also give us a new constitution, Reno?
Yeah, it is almost impossible to have a new constitution in your first term, because you're going to have to step on a lot of toes, and then it's going to make people not want you to come back. Having a new constitution is something that you, as a pragmatic politician, that you want to do in your second term, because you're not coming back. But if you try to do that, you see, Nigeria is
make a lot of enemies.
You're going to make a lot of enemies.
Okay, let's move along, because I want to talk about what is happening in the Senate, and also talk about President Jonathan. So the Senate, suspended your friend, Senator Natasha Akpoti.
Okay.
Of course, I mean that in the only consent. So, but the 6 months has passed, and she wants to return. They said no, you can't return, because there's a court case. But as I said, that court case was even before the suspension itself. What I wanted to ask you, and I know your view about, I know that your argument about Natasha. But what I want to ask you, Reno, is that if Natasha is not the person that is receiving this treatment, will your attitude, will you support the suspension of an elected representative by the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, suspension happens in the United Kingdom in Parliament. I worked at the British Parliament as a temp while I was doing my master's in England. So suspension happens there. Suspension happens at Congress in the United States. I've been to Congress several times. So you can suspend.
Let
me land.
Right.
So you can suspend. The issue there is that Natasha Akpoti has a pattern of dishonesty. She's falsely accused me of similar things to what she's accused the Senate President, and she lied against me. Now, if I didn't have a first-class British Airways ticket, of which I had to go and ask British Airways to send to me, proving that I was not in the country on May 6, 2014, when the President Jonathan hosted President Uhuru Kenyatta to a state banquet and also showed my passport with a stamp from U.S. immigration, she would have finished me. My life would have been over. She lied against me, saying that I made sexual advances to her at that event, and I wasn't even in the country. Eventually, I was paid a huge sum as out-of-court settlement. So that is a pattern of dishonesty. Another pattern of dishonesty that we see is when she went for the International Parliamentary Union. She sat on a seat with the label Nigeria and spoke as if she was representing Nigeria. Actually, that seat did not belong to her. That seat belonged to Honorable Kafilat, who had been called to the high table. And then when she saw that that seat was empty, she stealthily went there and sat down. And that was opportunistic. It shows that is how it happens. So if I'm lying, I mean, Natasha is very, very quick at going to court, then she should take me to court. So that shows dishonesty. Now, I don't know what happened between her and the Senate president because I wasn't there. But one thing I know is that Natasha is a liar, a very dishonest human being. Now, in the case of her suspension, look, you've seen situations whereby governors were impeached, or governors, maybe they said they won election and then maybe another person was declared and then they went to court. When they went to court, sometimes they won their case. And when they won their case, after the time, like the 4 years, those governors argued before court and said, no, I'm not going to go because, I mean, this period I was in court. And then the court ruled in their favor. An example is Peter Obi. And that's why in Anambra, they don't have elections with other people. That's why in a state like...
Off-season.
Exactly. That's why in some other states, they have off-season elections. Like Osho. So the same thing is this. This woman went to court. The case is pending in court. It's sub judice. Now, she cannot say she wants to now come back to the National Assembly when she was the one that took people to court. And she is a very, very, litigious individual. She's in court with the Senate president. She's in court with Umar, she's in court with one or two other principal officers. And then she's made allegations against other people. She's accused the Senate president and the former governor, Yahaya Bello of Kogi, of attempting to kill her. She's presented no evidence. These are sexual harassment allegations against the Senate president. She's presented no evidence. She just relies on social media, on people like, what's her name, Obi Ezekwesili. And Obi Ezekwesili herself has serious integrity issues. Very serious integrity issues. So these are people who are trying to project themselves. So look, if you look at the facts of the matter unemotionally, if this was not a mixed-race, light-skinned woman who is pretty and knows how to manipulate people, if this was a man like me, with white beards, and then, like... people like Obi and those, opportunistic people around that would not take this case the way it is. So we need to focus on what cannot lie. Let us focus on the facts. This woman is a terribly dishonest individual who has taken several cases to court, and the public as well as the National Assembly should allow those court cases play out. And when they play out, whatever the court says should happen, should happen. She should sit at home until the court says that the case has been adjudicated upon.
All right. So maybe this last question as we begin to round up. What do you say to the possibility of President Jonathan running again, and of course against President Tinubu? There's been a lot of movements. As a matter of fact, I think last week President Goodluck and one of your good friends, Peter Obi, met. And Peter Obi was the one that tweeted about it, showed us the picture. There is speculation that Peter Obi will even step down for Goodluck. There's speculation that Atiku Abubakar might step down for Goodluck, and then suggest that Tambuwa should be the vice president to Goodluck. What's your take on this potential of this discussion of President Goodluck joining the presidential race for 2027?
I have unconditional love for former President Jonathan, and I have unconditional access to him. I can stop this interview or even write in this interview and I can call him, he will pick up. My phone calls to President Jonathan does not go pram, 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 pram. It goes pram and he picks up at once. So if I have unconditional love for him, and if I have, unrestricted access to him, why should I come on national television to talk about his ambition?
Because you are a public speaker. You express your views in public. That's where that's really what Nigerians believe is your day job. You talk about issues. You're a public intellectual, Reno.
I am involved in this to an extent whereby I cannot be objective. I can only say this. In 2027, I will campaign vigorously for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu to return as president of Nigeria. And I believe he's going to be re-elected.
Even if Jonathan is running.
Listen, just remove any even condition. I'm going to say this. I'm not going to speak about former President Jonathan publicly. I have access to him. And let me tell you something there. I love former President Jonathan more than any other person other than my wife and my children and my parents. I'm telling you. I named my daughter after him. What kind of, I mean, how many people can you do that for? I named my daughter. My daughter is a baby after him. However, I'm not going to talk about him here. What I will say is that in 2027, I will be campaigning for, and I will project Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and I am confident that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to be re-elected as president of Nigeria for a second term in 2027.
Okay, I mean, Reno, you know, just because you and I were on the show and we are cool, I can tell you easily that what you have just said is that you're not going to support President Goodluck if he chooses to run.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
I know you didn't say it, but that's the implication because there's a big boss, Reno.
Let me just tell you something.
Let me just tell you Jonathan running 2027.
Something. I know something that you don't, and that President Jonathan knows, and both of us we share confidence. So because I know that thing, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to just...
Does that thing indicate that he will run?
I didn't say so, and I'm not going to say so. And anything that I'm going to say, I will say to him privately. I'm not going to talk about him publicly. But I enjoy his confidence. He enjoys my confidence. And in 2027, I will be supporting Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu for re-election.
Okay. Do you think that the president should keep his vice president in 2027, Senator Kashim Shettima?
That is a decision solely for the president, and no other person can make that decision. It's his decision. You know, I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of boss. What about Peter Obi? Do you think Peter Obi should step down for anybody in 2027?
I mean, other than ethnicity backing up his campaign, Peter Obi is not qualified to run as a local council development area in Lagos. Okay, I'll give you an example.
Former governor, Reno.
Yeah, he was former governor of a state like Anambra. I'm going to tell you something. In Lagos, one investment, and this is not the biggest investment that Tinubu did, but one investment, Eco Atlantic City, is $6 billion. Please, you can fact check me. If you are watching at home, you can Google it, fact check me. The entire GDP of Anambra is $6 billion. So how can you begin to compare a man like Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and then under Peter Obi as governor, he almost doubled poverty in Anambra? I mean, you can fact check me.
I can say also that, you know, and I agree with you entirely, that you can't compare Peter Obi to...
I'm not even done. Please, I'm not even done. The man is intellectually lazy. If you look at his qualifications, of all of the presidential candidates in 2023, he was the most intellectually backward. He had a poor degree in philosophy. If you look at Kwankwaso has a PhD in water engineering.
He made good in business. Wouldn't you consider?
Listen, a trader is not a leader. You have people who are illiterate and are making good in business. Well, Cosmos Maduka is an illiterate, he's making good in business, but you're not going to make him president of Nigeria because being president of Nigeria is more intricate than trading. Anybody can trade. In the United Kingdom, in England, the aristocrats, they don't want to trade because they consider it as a low, below them. Anybody can buy for 5 naira and sell for 10 naira. That is not intellectualism.
Well, you know, don't let's say too much about your very good friend Peter Obi. But let me just thank you for making the time to have this interview.
But how come now? You see, you are dressed like this now. Okay, no shell.
And by the way, you know, I must commend your the fact that you are always dressed in Nigeria outfits.
Nigeria spends $4 billion every year importing clothes like this.
No, my own clothes are not imported though. These are Nigerian tailor-made.
Okay, then I forgive you for that.
Possibly maybe the bow tie I bought in New York, but my suit and shirt and trousers are Nigerian made. And you know, I dress like this because you know, yeah, it's just a choice. I also have my days that I wear agbadas. You know, when I first came to the U.S. and I met some African Americans that, you know, and I dressed like this, I wear at times, say, well, why are you dressing white? And I said to them that my grandfather, not just my father, my grandfather wore a suit and a bow tie. So it's a question of choice. But I entirely, support Made in Nigeria, and I like the fact that, you have made it a major style to promote Made in Nigeria, even here in New York tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reno, for your role in national development and national discourse. And thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
Oh, you're very welcome. God bless you.
And there we have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means that Nigeria will win because we will always push the major issues. My name is Laula Konde. Thank you for watching, and by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.